you know it's a Pops recording. They have their own sound. It's a pop sound, it's a symphony hall sound.
When I think of the legacy of Lenny, it just blows me away, really. When you watched him on the podium, he was the music.
Beethoven teaches you a lot. He teaches you discipline. He teaches you how to resolve. You see, Beethoven is the great resolver. He finds solutions all the time.
You know it's a Pops recording. They have their own sound. It's a pop sound, it's a symphony hall sound, it's an American sound. It's a sound of what Fiedler started, mixed in with the John Williams film era, with Keith taking it beyond that into his generation. I can always tell it's the Boston Pops from any other orchestra.
Arthur Fiedler was a member of the Boston Symphony, as was his father. It was very much a family business back then. And in 1929 or so, Fiedler applied for the job. He was 33, 34 at the time. And they said, "Go away, kid, you bother me, you're too young." So Fiedler took an offer to go start free concerts on the Esplanade. He was so successful and immediately drew an audience. Very quickly, they realized their mistake, brought him into the fold, and the two grew together. I mean, Arthur Fiedler developed this brand, and the brand made Arthur Fiedler into a household name across the country.
I don't think anyone had any idea that he would be in that position for 50 years. Arthur Fiedler liked to say that he loved good music of all genres.
Not just classical music, but all music.
He once said there are two kinds of music, good music and bad music. Let's play the good music. I mean, he had more charisma. He looked every part of conductor. He had that, white hair, and he had that mustache, very serious, walked up to the podium, turned to the audience and bowed, and right into it.
I think Fiedler was a consummate showman. He figured out a way to include very significant content in these concerts, present them in a way that they became a popular phenomenon. He ascended at the beginning of the era of recorded music. As I often say, everybody who had a Victrola had at least one Arthur Fiedler record.
He would dress up in the style of a fireman or a baseball player, anything to sell albums. Harry Ellis Dixon particularly said, he could be a great musician, we could all be a curmudgeon, if he didn't get what he wanted, he'd make demands on everybody. They had to really play up to his standards. When Fiedler walked in, the oceans parted for Arthur Fiedler. He would pull up outside the stage entrance. I remember he had a little Volkswagen, and it was Pops on his license plate.
He was one with the Boston Pops by the time of his passing. There was no separating Arthur Fiedler and the Boston Pops. And anybody who you put on that podium at that point would be seen as a pretender to the throne. So what they did, I think, is went and looked for someone who had the requisite skills to do the job, but whose fame was assured for something totally outside.
He brought film music to us like we'd never played it before. But he wasn't an orchestra player. He was totally different. In some ways, he had even a broader perspective of music than Fiedler did. Certainly back then, his conducting wasn't as good as it is now. He sort of grew into that part of the job, but he has always been such a wonderful musician. I've never met anyone who has a set of ears like John does. He hears everything. He balances an orchestra beautifully.
John must have had an overwhelming task when he came here, not only replacing somebody who not just had been here for a half century, but really had created the modern institution as we knew it. And also to have the day in, day out job of conducting an orchestra. This was not conducting his own film scores in the Hollywood studio.
They say I've waited 58 professional years to have the pleasure of appearing with this distinguished group of ladies and gentlemen under the helm of Mr. John Williams. I thank you very much.
I would like to thank the Pops and John Williams for making this possible. This adds a kind of legitimacy to my career that I was never expecting.
He's one of the few true musical geniuses that I have known. Yes, he brought a level of Hollywood glamour, and there was a wow factor associated with that, but he brought a lot more significance as an artist, and that is what allowed it at the end of the day to be a successful tenure.
When John decided that he was going to hang it up as conductor of the Boston Pops, the consensus was that we should hire Keith Lockhart. Nobody knew who he was, basically, but we looked at that as a positive.
Since we are Penn and Teller, we thought we'd show you a little bit about how we do it in case you want to try it out at home. You just have a big box like this, get your partner to squeeze himself up like a little pretzel, fit in the bottom, and then you just find yourself some kid hanging around backstage. And you slip him $20. Thanks a lot, kid. By the way, what's your name, man? Hey, I'm Keith Lockhart. Keith Lockhart!
He's young, good-looking, energetic, and he was able to immediately connect.
It's very much of an honor and very humbling to be here.
Keith was 35 years old when he took the job, the same age that Arthur Fiedler was when Arthur Fiedler became conductor of the Boston Pops.
I've completely blocked out my first year. I think it's a trauma response of some sort. It was so much, so fast, and such a big change in everything in my life. Going from being the associate conductor of the Midwest Regional Major Orchestra to being a photo spread in People magazine in the course of 6-7 weeks was pretty overwhelming.
What a band! Hello, Pops. Hello, Moms. Hello, kids. And a big hello to the maestro extraordinaire, Mr. Keith Lockhart.
I love him because he's wonderful.
John was a great support. He said, you're going to be tempted coming in to this position to try really hard to put your stamp on it as quickly as possible, to make it really obvious that it is your own. He said, don't do that. He said the orchestra has been going strong for over a century, and it will go on after both of us are long gone. If you just show yourself to be a good steward of this tradition, to be respectful of what this orchestra has become and, of the great history, people will support you, people will rally around you, and over time, your predilections as a musician and as a human being will begin to show through in the choices that you make, and the orchestra will begin to reflect you. And he was absolutely right. Now, you know, 23 years into it, it no longer feels, as I've said, like you know, I'm a teenager stealing my dad's car keys.
I'm Joe Hearne, and I'm a double bass player in the Boston Symphony. There it is. I've been in the Boston Symphony for 56 years now. I started when I was 19, but right away, as soon as I could afford it, I bought a little airplane, and for 25 years, I taught flying, and I flew, and I went to school, and at the end, I was flying a little Citation jet with an airline transport pilot rating. Music and flying have a similarity, that you see something with your eye, and then you move your hands in quite small motions. An airplane is big and heavy, but actually the input is very, very delicate and very slight, and playing an instrument is very similar to that. And also it's fun. They're both romantic, which is the best part, really. I met my wife flying. I was a gliding instructor, and she was a gliding pilot. We've traveled all over the world together. She writes books for children, and we've been to India chasing tigers. We've been to Africa chasing lions. And this particular one in the Arctic was the coldest I've ever been. We were chasing polar bears. I always said to Jan, you can turn me into an animal, but don't turn me into a troll. I don't want to appear as a troll in one of her books. So she didn't turn me into a troll. She turned me into something else. She turned me into Berlioz the bear. And I guess you've got to be famous for something, and I guess I'm famous as a bear.
I believe that a great new era of eclecticism is at hand. Eclecticism in the highest sense. No matter how serial or stochastic or otherwise intellectualized music may be, it can always qualify as poetry as long as it is rooted in earth. I also believe, along with Keats, that the poetry of earth is never dead, as long as spring succeeds winter and man is there to perceive it.
When I think of the legacy of Lenny, it just blows me away, really. When you watched him on the podium, he was the music.
There was an electricity in what he did when he was conducting that was like fire that caught on with the orchestra.
He's this lion of American composition.
He really considered himself a Boston person, and the Boston Symphony is his orchestra at that time.
Hard to believe that Leonard Bernstein was born 100 years ago in Lawrence, Massachusetts in 1918.
His dad, like so many other Jews, had come from a small place in the Ukraine. By the time Leonard comes along, he's now living in Boston near the great congregation Mishkan Tefillah. That's where Leonard Bernstein really grows up, and that's where he hears his first music. The music director was Solomon Gregory Braslavsky. He brings this great European choral music tradition to Mishkan Tefillah. Leonard Bernstein comes tremendously taken with Braslavsky, who clearly mentored and trained him. Braslavsky was asking, what makes Jewish music authentically Jewish? And fascinatingly, Bernstein is going to ask, what makes American music authentically American? at Mishkent-Tfila. They have a trip to go and hear Arthur Fiedler at the Boston Pops. And Samuel Bernstein brings his son, Leonard. And that is apparently the first time that he heard this kind of concert. And it's worth noting that Arthur Fiedler was also one of the first Jewish conductors. The very fact that he knew, and everybody knew, that Fiedler was Jewish and the conductor of the Pops must have allowed him to think, maybe this is possible for me too.
Bernstein was invited to be one of the inaugural 5 conducting students at Tanglewood, then the Berkshire Music Center, in 1940, where he studied under Kusevitsky. Kusevitsky would have a groundbreaking role in Bernstein's life. He gave him initial opportunities to conduct the Boston Symphony and the Berkshire Music Center Orchestra. Kusevitsky actually invited him to conduct the BSO on several occasions. Kusevitsky was also an advocate for Bernstein's own compositions. Bernstein became the assistant conductor of the New York Philharmonic and had his auspicious debut filling in for Bruno Walter. This was the moment where Bernstein became an international sensation. The rest is pretty much history from how his career took off.
I was not born in sunny Hispania. My father came from Rovno, Gubernia. In 1/2 hour I'm dancing a tango.
When I auditioned for him at his office in New York, I was auditioning for the Mahler Fourth, and I wasn't asked to learn it, but he said, well, do you know it? And I said, no, I don't, Maestro. He sat down and taught it to me. So to learn the 4th movement of that symphony with Leonard Bernstein was a really nice gift for a lifetime. He obviously loved singers. His music is to show off singers and to understand them. And we're not the easiest lot. We take a little bit of patience and understanding, and boy, did Lenny have that. So much of it was a teacher. That was part of his joy in life.
Bernstein loved the dramatic flair of musical theater and operetta. By the time he was developing his conducting career, he also had this opportunity and desire to compose for the Broadway stage. Bernstein had a versatility as a composer where he could give you the mambo scene in West Side Story and then this deeply religious and spiritual work that questioned the very existence of humanity. Bernstein's music is very much at the heart of our fabric as the American people. Bernstein always looked back to Tanglewood and the Boston Symphony. He was able to grow as a musician with this home base of a musical community.
Well, Tanglewood was a very special place for him. His last concert was at Tanglewood, and then his earliest concerts were at Tanglewood.
I think we're all so lucky now in the 21st century to be able to look back to the convergence between Kusevitsky, Bernstein, and the Boston Symphony.
I was always taken with music. I was always enthusiastic about music when I was a kid. There was no music at home, but there was a library, a local library that was very well stocked with records, and that's really where I got to know a lot of music. I think I joined when I was about 8 years old, and just every week would take out these LPs and listen and listen. There was a recording that I took out of the library. It was Beethoven's Fourth Symphony. I remember being so struck by the transition from the slow introduction into the main part of the first movement, the repeated dominant seventh chords. It still kind of gives me goosebumps when I think about that. It's just one of those kind of defining moments, you know, when you really discover something. Beethoven teaches you a lot. He teaches you discipline. He teaches you how to resolve. You see, Beethoven is the great resolver. He finds solutions all the time. He puts his questions to you and always finds an answer. The stereotype of Beethoven, this kind of boisterous, dramatic, tormented soul, which he was all those things, but he was so many other things too. And I think to get a good view, a true view of Beethoven, you have to really see the whole picture. To do this job, I think you've got to be totally crazy about it. You have to be nuts about music. You know, it has to be something that you know you can't do without. And if you don't feel that, there's no point in doing it. Just do something else. So that would be the motto, love what you do.
To learn more about the Boston Symphony Orchestra, please visit www.bso.org.